The story of the Anguilla racing boats is more than the story of a boat or a race. This is the story of a people, their culture, their passion, geography, and the spirit that is the Anguillian. The passion of the Anguillian people for boat building and boat racing is clearly evident in this boatyard. We're here at Rebel Marine in Anguilla. David Carty of Rebel Marine in Anguilla is a yacht builder, historian, and author. He comes from a long line of boat builders and seafarers.
I started the business, but I was inspired by my grandfather, who was a schooner builder and schooner captain. And I just loved hearing stories about what he did and how he lived. And I very much wanted to be a boat builder myself. So, like I say, I've made it a more modern business. I mean, we have all the trappings of international marketing and, of course, high-tech materials and all the rest of that. But I have sort of, exploited, if you want to put it that way, our natural tendency as Anguillians to be good at this craft. So the men who work with me are almost natural boat builders, and we've done fairly well. We've exported boats to the region and to the U.S., to Florida, North Carolina, and New Jersey. So we've reached out much farther than the shores of Anguilla and even St. Martin. We've done boats for St. Martin too, of course. So like I say, we try to continue the tradition in ways that we can. So far, so good.
Today, the island of Anguilla can boast of 33 pristine beaches, its world-class resorts, a well-developed financial structure. But boat building is in the blood of the Anguilla people.
This has been going on for hundreds of years. Anguilla, as you know, has always been, prior to tourism, a rather poor island. And prior to the revolution, we had to depend a lot on the sea and what we could do with fishing and schooner building and sloop building and trading. So for the last 300 years, right up to the revolution, we have been very dependent on the sea and what the sea could produce for us. And that obviously involves the art of boat building and seamanship and sailing and so on. So Anguilla has always had a reputation for being, good at this and having good shipwrights and so on, even though it was in the traditional sense. I have now been doing it in a more modern way with more, modern materials and all the rest of it. But the tradition of seamanship and boat building craftsmanship is very, very old.
In order to keep the tradition alive and help the Anguillian people to reclaim their ancestral birthright, Mr. Carty has delivered the first and only documentary historical record of the Anguilla racing boat.
It documents the history of boat racing in Anguilla going right back to 1796. Although it does deal with the modern boat racing and it shows that in, I think, beautiful images and beautiful footage, it's really about the genesis of why Anguilla has this unique and crazy way of racing boats. And I made it primarily to teach Anguillians, our own people, to remind them of this wonderful history and heritage that we have. But it's also the history of the community. It's a history, it's a black history. It's how people in a small, very poor island developed inadvertently from their economic and social experience, a sport which is now a big festival. So I think it tells a very unique and uplifting story about how our people struggled over time to be what they are today and to have this unique sport. And the piece is called Nothing Baffling, which is an old-time command on a racing boat between the forward man and the captain translated into English, it means nothing is baffling. But of course, in dialect, we say nothing baffling. So I was always impressed by the language they used and the terms the sailors used. And I just fell in love with nothing baffling from I was 16 years old. Why is boat racing considered the #1 sport in Anguilla? I think that answer lies in our history. The reason why has more to do than just with boat racing. It has to do with who we are as Anguillians, who we are as a people. Because as a professional boat builder myself, I have seen young men in Anguilla who have come to share with me in my own company a remarkable ability on their parts to understand what it means to build a boat without any real formal training, without any real education in naval architecture or boat building. And I cannot help but think when I look at them and I see them work that this is something that they've inherited from forebears before who, many of them lying on marked graves without any recognition, without any tombstone. And yet they were instrumental in sending an invisible heritage down to these generations that have followed. But I've always felt that there is a gap, an absence of fully understanding that historical connection. It is a link to a very important part of Anguilla's history. And it is why we are what we are today, who we are today. And that is why I think this story of boat racing is important.
The documentary, Nothing Baffling, which chronicles the close association of Anguillians to the sea, is one that all Anguillians could be proud of.
Even though it's specifically about Anguilla, it's also a Caribbean history. And I want to believe that Caribbean people would love to see it too and share in its experience. When you look at a little Anguillian boy frolicking in the sea, behind a little pond boat made of turpentine, with sails made of plastic bags that he has cut with a scissors, and frolicking behind his boat and shouting hardly, he is simply expressing something that has been in his heritage and his history for hundreds of years. And he is the seed for another generation of Anguillian boat builders who will continue to make this tradition proud and continue to preserve a very enduring part of our history. Anguilla sailing boat has also been modernized somewhat. Instead of using nails, we now use epoxy to keep the frames, but it's still planked with white pine. And instead of the frames being made out of white cedar cut from trees, we now use laminated plywood. But it's still basically a wooden boat, even though it is covered to a certain extent with epoxy. So the old tradition has passed. And there's a good reason, because we used to cut down everything that grew. Any tree that was half a meter high, was cut down for boat building. So that's a good thing. We're not persecuting the trees as we used to. But yeah, the tradition is still there in the sense that there is still a passion for the craftsmanship. There's still a passion for building boats. People like boats, and they like to see how boats are being built, and they like to be around boat building. So that is still there. And you see that a lot in the modern Anguillian racing boat, because when they are built in communities, under trees, and so on, even though they're a little bit more modern in how they're built. But there are a lot of people always hanging around, kids, the community hangs around while the boat is being constructed. And that indicates, the tradition is still strong.
I like sailing boats because keep me occupied sometimes, fun. Expand my skills, and I just want to be out in the big world one day sailing boats.
Rebel Marine, and by extension Anguilla, is producing world-class boats for export.
This is a boat that we are constructing in collaboration with a company in Florida. That's a one-of-a-kind sports fishing boat. It's the only boat of its type anywhere in the world. And it has some very unique features that would take some time to explain. We'd have to go through the boat. I don't know if you have that time. But it's a boat that we hope to get into an international market, both in the US and South America, and perhaps even in Europe. Nowadays, the one behind me is a very high-tech construction. It's all done with foams, NIDA cores and core cells, and sophisticated weaves and glass and epoxy resins. So there's absolutely no wood in the boat behind us, none at all. And it's done with these, very modern foams that have positive buoyancy all through it. It's important to know that we are custom boat builders, so we don't build and then sell. We build according to what the client needs. So we can be building this today and we're building a 50-foot ferry tomorrow, or a high-tech sports fishing boat the next month. So it's what the client needs.
Whoa.